Hello, everyone, and welcome to Deckbuilding Derezzed. I'm your host, CodeMarvelous, and today I'm joined by Daine, Deck of the Week list author for Robocop, the Surat combo deck that we were very excited about, maybe about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
Yep. Hey there.
So, why don't you tell everybody watching at home, Daine, a little bit about how you got into the game and your journey towards making this surprisingly powerful Surat deck?
I started playing Netrunner about 3 years ago. So I think there were, maybe 2 or 3 data packs out. One of my good friends who I actually cube Magic with, play a lot of games with, he got it demoed for him at a game store. Really liked it, thought that he would really like it. Bought a core. He and I played it a couple times, and I fell in love with it immediately. He actually fell out of love with it within the first month or so, and so that forced me to kind of look around and find new play groups. I went to Chicago Regional in April of 2013, and as is kind of my... How do I put this nicely to myself? As is my habit, I tend to build weird, janky, stupid things. I don't like to just play the top lists of everything. I did this with Magic. I did it.
You're too cool. You're too cool to like the lists that other people like. You like the indie bands that nobody's heard of yet.
Well, yes, I'm a hipster through and through. I guess I don't have good taste in music, but when it comes to deck building games, yes, that's exactly what happened.
That comes from a place of love. I'm basically the exact same way. I have like an allergy to playing decks that other people are playing.
Yes, that's exactly it. And for me, and in Chicago's meta, RP had come out in the second or third pack.
Right. But it was bad for a long time, long time.
Everyone picked it up and said, this is bad, no one can do anything with it. And I picked it up and said, I think I can make this work. And so I built a deck with, I think it had a couple Hourglass in it, had a couple Janus in it, and just basically every money card they'd printed. And it lost one game, and it won me the regional.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and at that point, I'm hooked on this game, right? I mean, winning is fun. Winning on your own terms is even more fun. And there's a lot of fun.
I would agree with that.
And so
I would agree with that.
That kind of started it for me. I think at that point, then, everyone else who was in Chicago, they knew each other. They didn't really know me. I was just kind of the upstart. But after that point, they're like, hey, you're the kid who won the regional. Like, here's when we meet. Here's when we play. So I was very quickly kind of hooked into the scene. We have a lot of live Netrunner here in Chicago.
Yeah.
It's easy to play 3 nights a week. Face-to-face Netrunner, and so I basically have been playing 3 nights a week every week since March of 2013.
Seems good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. I do appreciate it, because this deck was of incredible interest to me, just because I love when people do interesting things with purple.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on. It's really a thrill.
A thrill. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Let's go through it.
I'm because I'm a hipster. I mean, I do win sometimes, and I think I manage to win more games than I should, given the decks that I play. But it's nice to be invited to a series that I recognize the names of the people that you invite. So
thank you.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, so let's go through it. Let's start with the agendas. A lot of it's pretty standard. We got 3 ABTs. We've got some big ice in this deck, so I imagine... how often do you take the risk and run the ABT without Jackson?
Without Jackson, it really just depends on how many ice are out or how behind I am. So with, 16 ice, if I haven't seen any, if it's early... I'll absolutely take the risk. If I know that my opponent is strong, I'm more likely to take the risk because that added benefit is going to help me out more.
Right.
If I'm playing against, someone who I think I can beat even without the ABT, then I won't. But, the upside of hitting even with one piece of ice is so high. I think I probably fire ABTs more frequently than I generally would with an HB list.
Right. In another where. Right, because also, as we'll discuss later, a lot of the ice that you could be potentially hitting with this ABT, it's not like, oh, I saved 3 credits. There's some serious savings here.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
we've got a 1x Chronos project, which everybody's on Levy. So is that the primary motivator? Was there any other motivators as to why you put in 3-1 into this deck?
For most of the Store Champ season, I was on 3 Chronos Project and a Biotic Labor, just to kill Dumbleforks. So it got scaled down to 1 just because I needed 1 extra 1-pointer after doing the 3 GFIs.
Right.
And Chronos is absolutely my go-to right now. I love that agenda. There's nothing that hurts me more as the runner, and honestly, I can't count the number of games it just flat out wins me that I otherwise should lose. It won me a game at the regional I brought this deck to. That, it was against a really strong player, and I probably would have lost, but I managed to score the Chronos project. I think there were only 10 cards in the bin, but there were 2 parasites and a levy, and it rolled.
Right. We got Global Foods for the same reason Global Foods in a lot of decks. It's just good. We don't need to belabor this. Basically, every deck that I've had on the channel, we've got Global Foods, because Global Food is so good.
And I don't need the influence for other things, and so 3 GFI
it's good.
Makes sense, yeah.
And we got Vitruvius. Vitruvius is bread and butter HB. If you can get the counter on it, it's great. If not, you can never advance it out in a remote that they may or may not be able to get into, or may not check.
Yeah. I managed to get a surprisingly large number of counters off it early game. So if it's the first agenda I score, it very frequently has 2 counters on it.
Okay.
Late game, not so much. If I can score a double advanced agenda, I'm going to find a GFI.
Right. Late game, because you just want to close.
Never advanced. Yeah.
Right. All right. So the assets are kind of the core of this deck. Well, assets in one particular upgrade.
Right.
So let's kind of talk about the kind of standouts of things that we haven't seen a lot of thus far.
Okay.
And let's start with one of the linchpins of the deck. Let's go with Brain Taping Warehouse. So for those of you watching at home, Brain Taping is 1-4. Man, HB really makes out like a bandit with these ratios of their res cost to trash cost on a lot of these assets.
It's true.
But the res cost of all Bioroid ice is lowered by 1 credit for each unspent click the runner has, and it's not unique, so you can have multiple of these in play. So the earlier the runner runs in their turn, you get a discount on Bioroids.
Right. This has kind of been a favorite of hipsters all over. Edie from Run Last Click, this is one of his favorite cards. He swears by it. He's been trying to make it work, and I think he's a good player, so I'm pretty sure he has made it work.
We tried to make it work in Cybernetics division. Didn't work out so great.
Yeah.
Me and him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very, very frequently it ends up being slightly underwhelming, simply because the runner can play around it.
Right.
But with Surat City Grid, we found a way to work around that to where they can't work around it, and this card is insanely good when it pops.
Right. So, just to kind of reiterate, and then we'll jump right over to Surat City Grid, is one of the biggest problems with this card is that it usually fires 1 time. You maybe get full effect of it the first time, and then they're like, oh, that's in play? Well, I'm either going to go get it right now, or I'm just going to play safer and always run last click for the rest of the game.
Well, and something else to consider is that even when it's getting full effect, quote unquote, it's only 3 credit discount because they're using 1 click to start a run.
That's also true. But when you combo it with a lovely card like Surat City Grid, interesting things can happen, can't they?
Right. Yes. This was the brainchild this was the the first thing I thought of when I saw Surat City Grid, I'm sure a lot of people thought of it as well. The reason I'm lucky enough to be on the show here is because I was stupid enough to bring it to a regional, and it went undefeated at the regional. So the Surat City Grid was worth the 6 influence for me. It's this bizarre new card, 2 influence. It's 2 to res, 3 to trash. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Correct.
And it reads, whenever you res a card in or protecting this server, not including Surat City Grid, you may res another card at a discount of 2 credits.
Yeah.
And so, I'm sure everyone is aware of the combo, but here's how it works. I build a giant server of ice that's kind of too expensive to res at cost. I res Surat City Grid. I res all my other brain taping warehouses. Anything that the runner has let live. Which at the time was all of them, and now it's less so, but it was fun while it lasted. Before people understood how powerful this combo could be. And then you res an asset in the same server as Surat City Grid. So sometimes this is brain taping warehouse, often it's a Jackson or a money asset of some kind. And as soon as that happens, by the way, I'm doing this at the start of the runner's turn. So the runner still has 4 clicks. So each brain taping warehouse is reducing the cost of this res by 4. The Surat City Grid is reducing it by another 2. So I'm saving either 6, 10, or 14 credits, depending on how many brain taping warehouses I have. And so I can res, say, a Janus for 1 credit. As soon as I do that, it procs the Surat City Grid again, because Surat City Grid says whenever you res something in or protecting this server, res another card. And so I'll res something else, probably a Heimdall 2, in that same server. And hey, it procs Surat City again. I res a Heimdall 2, and then I'm going to res a Janus over R&D, and the runner is sad.
Very sad.
I just saved, 28 credits, 40 credits?
Yep.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, a lot of money. A lot.
Yeah.
And so basically, majority of this deck, when we look at the other cards, are geared towards accelerating the deck towards getting this combo off.
Right.
So we've got some of the standards. We have Adonis campaign and Eve campaign, and those are just good, solid HB cards that are going to help you win the normal way in case the plan fails.
Right.
And then, and it's also important to note that we're grid hungry in this deck. We've got 2 grids. We've also got Breaker Bay grid.
Yes. So it's a bit of a nombo with if you're going for the Surat City Grid. Breaker Bay is 0 to res. Like, when it works, it is spectacular. And if you're on asset economy, Breaker Bay into a free Eve is just stupidly good.
It's really good. It's the best HB card ever printed.
Yeah, by a wide margin.
Yeah, by a wide margin. It's just so good.
Yeah,
Breaker Bay, tell your friends. If you're not playing it in HB, stop hurting yourself and put it in there. Yeah. So let's talk about some of the other key assets. We have Advanced Assembly Lines, which is one of the other new good ones that's out of business first. And it's free on a Breaker Bay grid, kids. And it gives you 3 credits when you res it. And you can install a non-agenda card from HQ, paying the install cost. You can use this ability during a run. So one of the neat combos that I was thinking about is how often do you use this to res, install a brain taping, res that, and start the combo?
It has happened. Very often it's just a hedge fund. I install it, it gets me a credit. I pay to res it, it earns me 2 credits, and then on the runner's turn, I trash it and I install a card, it gets me another credit because I'm ETF. And so it's 4 credits. That said, it very frequently was the reason why I was able to turn on the Surat City Grid combo. Just install the Advanced Assembly Lines in that server, res it, turn it on, I get some money as well. This also won me a game because it was over a Breaker Bay grid. I was playing against a criminal who was siphoning me down. I had a Vitruvius in the server, 5 points. and he was just a siphon spam. I think he siphoned me 2 or 3 times with the same Vitruvius in the server. But I got an advanced assembly lines over Breaker Bay. He siphons me a 0. My turn, I res it for free, gain 3 credits, and advance for the win.
Oh, feels so good.
Yeah. It's in this deck anyway, it's better than a hedge fund. And I love building decks without hedge funds.
Clearly, since this deck has none.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're all imaginary money here, right? Or money that you got to work for. So you have one of my all-time favorite cards from the core set, and that is Aggressive Secretary.
Yeah. This did a lot of work in testing, and it's actually done a lot of work since then. Didn't do a whole lot for me on the day of the tournament other than to start the Surat combo once. Which is unfortunate. It's a really high upside card that when it works, it wins you games.
Right.
And when it doesn't,
it's
fodder that gets trashed out of R&D and it makes you sad. But I love it. I put it in a lot of decks just because, especially against criminals, it just ends.
You can end a game. Right. You can just end a game. It's in the late game with it.
Right.
And you're still HB, so even an Anarch or a Shaper having a turn without their breakers is not insignificant.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the thing that I found with this deck and the thing that I love about this deck is a lot of decks don't really have an answer to even a single Janus, let alone 2 or 3 Januses they get rezzed. And so when they do manage to get an answer of any kind, like they fam a Janus or something, if I can trash that, they're done.
Right.
That investment is over, and when you can get your stuff rezzed in this deck, the runner realizes, okay, with how this deck is built, I have maybe 2 or 3 accesses left in me total. And so if I can deep dig or I can see the agenda I need in those last 3 accesses, then I can have a chance. Otherwise, I'm just done. And some decks literally, when I pull off the combo, they say, well, let's just save the time because I have no answer for that.
Right. Janus is just so good.
Yeah.
I've got it up on the screen right now. It's just so good. 8 strength sentry. There's very few things in this game that deal with that easily. There's really only the one card, and that's Switchblade.
Yeah, I mean, Shapers can have Deus Ex, but
again, that runs out of steam real quick.
Yeah.
Right.
And I search for my Chronos against those Shapers. If I can kill a clone chip or 2, even if you still have your levy, again,
slowing it down.
It's a matter of getting them to a point where they have a handful of accesses, and after that they're just done. They just scoop because they realize you got a Janus over R&D, you got a Janus over your server. I've already got 4 brain damage. Let's just go on to the next game.
All right. Yeah. So to close out the assets, we also have a single tech startup.
Yeah. This is the thing that makes me the most sad about this list, is that it's a singleton tech startup, because I realized in the tournament just how powerful it is. You res tech startup, you can find your brain taping warehouse, and the runner can't do anything about it between the time that they know that the tech startup is there, or the brain taping warehouse is there, and the time that you've already fired your combo.
Right,
and
because you fire it at the start of their turn, so they have no ability to deal with it.
Right. And by that point, it's too late. Once I pull off the combo even once, they're welcome to come and spend 4 credits and a click to come and trash my brain taping warehouses.
Absolutely, right. You've already gotten way more value out of that than they're going to get out of getting rid of it late. So, if we go down to upgrades, we already talked about Breaker Bay and Surat Grid. We have 3 Ash. So, you're taxing a lot of money. When I was looking at this list for the first time, I figured this is just, people are not really going to have money when they get to the end of a server in this deck, especially not necessarily centrals where they're going to still be getting taxed pretty well. And then this is just basically a deterrent to keep you from somebody being like, well, screw that remote. I'm going to camp R&D.
Yeah. I mean, against with Glacier decks, I think I've gotten used to having either a Caprice or an Ash on my scoring server before I feel safe to score.
Right.
I find that with this deck, I very frequently end up using Ash over R&D rather than in my remote.
Okay.
Because I'm never advancing most of my agendas. I'll want Ash on my remote if I'm going to score a GFI. But oftentimes, the remote is taxing enough that if I install Advance a GFI, I'm willing to give them those 2 points if they're going to come through my funhouse. And
Right.
so Ash almost always ends up over R&D. I think the thing that people tend to forget about Ash is how great it is early game. I'll keep a hand with no ice if everything else is perfect if I have an Ash, because I can just install Ash over R&D. They don't want to spend a click and 3 credits, and they're not going to beat the Trace. And especially on turn 1 or turn 2, that tempo loss is just so severe for them.
Right.
And so Ash is, I kind of consider it an extra form of early game R&D ice.
I think that's very interesting. I had never really thought of Ash in that way. Like, in my mind, I think of Ash, I think remote server, but I think everything that you've said as far as this card as early R&D protection is very accurate, especially with the ice suite that you're playing.
Yeah. I mean, a shaper will never trash it. They'll see it and they'll say, "Ugh, I can't. Like, if I trash this, if I pay the 3, I'm not going to be able to install my programs. I'm not going to be able to throw it on Procon. Like, I'll just leave R&D alone for a little bit."
Right. So, we've got, as far as ice is concerned, we're going big or we're going home.
Yeah.
As far as, like, holding down the early and mid game, we've got 3 Eli's. Pound for pound, it's the best ice in the game. Absolutely deserves to be on the most wanted list.
Absolutely. But even on the MWL, it still deserves to be a 3 of in basically every HB list you build.
Right, it's just so good. It's
Yeah.
it's a 4-strength barrier with 2 subroutines that cost 3. Like, it's great.
Yeah.
We've got Heimdall 1, which is probably one of the worst pieces of HB ice in the game, unless you don't have to pay actual credits for it, in which case it's amazing.
Yeah. It's rubbish until it's free, and then it's really good when it's free.
Yeah. And the reason we make that statement is unlike a lot of the 2.0s, people listening at home, Heimdall 1 only has one subroutine that actually does something terrible to you, and since you can break one subroutine for 1 click, it's basically like a really expensive Victor 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where they're like, oh, a Heimdall 2, I'll lose 1 click and jack out, right? The gameplay mechanic of how they're going to face check this when you're hard paying for it is terrible, because you might as well just have a Victor 1. But this, when you're getting it for free and now it's rezzed and they know that they have to deal with it, it's either going to cause them a lot of money or they're going to be throwing Deus Ex into the trash or burning through David counters.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is this works really well in if there's 2 of them, or it works well if you get a Heimdall 1 rezzed and either a Heimdall 2 or a Victor 2 or a Janus, because all of the answers that make Heimdall 1 kind of mediocre, David and just clicking through, people want to use their David counters or their clicks to address the better ice that's in this deck. And so Heimdall 1 doesn't get rezzed on its own, but as part of a balanced breakfast, it's pretty fierce.
It's pretty good. And it has a great piece of art. I like the art for it.
Yeah.
So we've got Heimdall 2, which is a great staple of HB Glacier.
Yeah. One of my favorite ice they've ever printed.
A lot better. I mean, let's just say you only have 2. Paying 1 for this is so trivial. Like, if you only have 2 brain tapings up when you fire the combo, paying 1 for this is still just trivial.
Yeah. Happened a lot to me. I think I rezzed more Heimdall 2s on the day than any other piece of ice.
Yeah, it's good. It's a really good card. So this one, they're going to be spending 2 clicks or they're going to be taking brain damage to the face because they have to spend 2 clicks if they're clicking through it. It's 7 strength. It's really tough to deal with if they're using a non-David program. It's just amazing.
I think the most common way people address this was clicking twice and taking a brain damage to get an access.
Which is so great.
It's great.
Because that makes Janus's better.
Yeah. And it puts them on a clock. I mean, they can do that a few times and then they've hurt themselves to the point to where they're just going to lose.
Right, and if they're a Faust-based deck, that brain damage piles up quick.
Oh yeah, Faust decks avoid brain damage above all else. I just hate it.
So we've got Victor 2, or two Victor 2s, which is, again, on ice that's kind of fallen out of favor recently, but when you're getting a huge discount. Can you speak a little bit about why the Victor 2s over the Victor 1s?
I've always been a booster of Victor 2. I think it's an extremely underrated ice. It's 5 strength for just 5 credits. Again, that can be a disadvantage if it's your only big ice or if people have a lot of David counters, but I'm thrilled to have people use Victor 2 counters or David counters on Victor 2. It's expensive to break with most of the code gate breakers. It's not yoggable. People have to click twice to get through it. So yes, they do bounce off of it for free because a Trace 2 is trivial.
Right.
But I'm more than happy to spend 5 credits to res this. This is one of them, the 2 ice that I consider as early game ice. I will absolutely spend 5 to res this anytime, anywhere. Victor 2 makes it into a lot of my HB lists. I think it's an exceptionally good piece of ice.
Okay, that's fair. And then we've got Ichi 2, which is, again, just a staple of HB Glacier.
We've got 2 Ichi 1s.
Oh, Ichi 1s. What did I say? Ichi 2?
Yeah.
But even so, Ichi 1 is what I meant to say, but
Right.
Ichi 1 is definitely a staple of HB.
Yeah. It's not great early game ice, unfortunately. But late game, it's exquisite, and it's well worth paying the 5 credits for.
Right, and it's also 4 cards for Faust, which is awful.
Yeah.
And then we've got everybody's favorite Dream Bioroid, Janus 1.0.
Yeah. The only thing that makes me sad when I think about Janus is the realization that I'll never get a Janus 2.0, which is really all I want.
It would just be too pejoratively costed,
which would make it offensively good when you can res it for free, either with bio efficiency research or
Oversight
Eliza's
AI.
Toy Box or Oversight AI. Yeah, like a Janus 2.0 would probably break the game a little bit.
It would make Blue Sun a lot better.
It would.
Yeah, because that's what we all need. But no, it's just fantastic. It's it's an 8-string Sentry, which is just ridiculous. And it's got 4 subroutines that do 1 brain damage apiece, which is just unreal. And it's clickable, but man, no runner base is running with 4 clicks remaining.
Yeah.
So if they don't have a way to program deal with this, every time they hit it, they're taking 1 brain damage.
Yeah.
At a minimum.
And honestly, I would have loved to have done a lot more damage with Janus, but when you get these things rezzed, a lot of people just kind of write it off as dead. They're like, well, that server's closed forever. I can't get through it.
Which is still okay. That's what this deck is counting on, because then you put an agenda in there and you just score.
Yeah. I would have loved to have killed more runners, but I won all my games just by setting up the server and then just scoring in a server that they didn't want to run.
Yeah. That's classic Netrunner. You found a way to use a combo to recreate classic Netrunner.
I love classic Netrunner. I'm glad to bring it back in any way it can be resurrected.
Res Ice, no fast advance, never advance in servers. It's like super old school. We're talking like Genesis Cycle right here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's the deck. It's actually surprisingly simple when we go over it. The execution, I imagine, is going to be more complicated. For all those of you watching at home, we're going to do a test run where we play against somebody on competitive Jinteki with this deck, and we'll see how we do. Daine, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Everybody, you can find A&R Black Hats wherever fine Netrunner content is sold, on YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, and also on Facebook and Twitter. Until we catch you again, always be running.